All right, folks, welcome to another episode. This time, I am so excited to welcome on Adam Thierer. He is a senior fellow at the R Street Institute. And how I've really enjoyed reading a lot of his writing. And honestly, I know I haven't said this yet, really enjoyed watching your congressional hearings and how you've framed some of the most important existential issues. The way that I'm going to describe you right now, without asking your permission, is you are a champion of ultimately minimizing regulation, but in the support of America's interests, fostering AI, tech advancement, free speech, U.S. competitiveness. Those are core pillars that I could not resonate more with. And I know a lot of folks that listen, a lot of people that I spend my time with, also that is near and dear to our heart. Just to give everyone a sense of Adam's background and honestly credentials. Like I said, senior fellow at R Street Institute, but has been spent serious time at Mercatus Center, the Cato Institute, which I know a lot of my friends were passing around their articles all the time, Heritage Foundation, and then I'm just going to read the title and the byline for the two books that I read summaries about. I plan on reading in length. Is Permissionless Innovation, 2016, continuing case for comprehensive technological freedom. All of those words strike a chord with me. And even the frame, permissionless innovation. And then 2020, Evasive Entrepreneurs and the Future of Governance, how innovation improves economies and governments. Once again, that right there, I just don't think there's many things that can fire me up more. So Adam, welcome to the show. And maybe instead of elaborating too much on the pedigree, because I think I've convinced people Adam's the real deal. What drives those passions? And then maybe how do you spend day in, day out right now?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Quinn. This is great to be here. So I'm passionate about liberty and about technological innovation. And my goal is to move us along to a world where innovators have the freedom to go out and dream the American dream and do wonderful things for the country, the economy, and for society. And that begins with a commitment to freedom and flexibility, first and foremost in the policy arena, to give the green light to entrepreneurs and innovators and investors to go out and do big, bold things for the country. And so my day-to-day life is spent dealing with a lot of really nerdy, boring policy issues, but important ones, where we have to figure out what is our policy framework going to be for the future. Are we going to embrace the future, or are we going to try to hold it back? Are we going to embrace a whole new disruptive kind of status quo changing regime? Or are we going to instead hold on to the past and instead embrace that status quo? And that's the fight that we see again and again and again. And, with every new technology, the fight begins again. You have to figure out, is this one going to be born free or is it going to be born into regulatory captivity? And that's exactly what we're confronted with now in the world of AI and advanced computation.
Yes. Oh, that was just the perfect segue. Born in regulatory captivity. Once again, I can tell, or I have a solid guess that you're a wordsmith, because each of these phrases pack a punch. I viscerally resonate with regulatory captivity. I could describe most listeners. No, it's hey, I started an AI language learning startup 8 years ago. I'm really proud of our progress. Know what I'm not proud of? The fact that in the last 3 weeks, I have spent north of 10 hours managing regulation. I hate it. And I'm I understand that there are cases for specific important guardrails and regulations. So it's not that I hate regulation writ large in all circumstances. What I don't enjoy is doing it myself as a founder. The sheer fact that me, the CEO, who could be fundraising, closing sales, hiring, casting vision of the team, is currently utterly exhausted by GDPR. It's such a long. Yeah. Anyone that even knows those 4-letter acronym knows the pit in your stomach that should form. That is also currently exhausted by certain labor law, state by state, just frustrations. Or that I could go on and on, but I spend a weird amount of my time managing regulation. So can you go one step further? Because a lot of folks will resonate of oh yeah, I work in operations at my buddy's startup and I got to do a lot of regulation personally. But how does regulatory captivity define entire industries.
Yeah, so let me walk back and define some terms here. So it seems pretty obvious, but let me explain what I mean by these. So if you're a new innovator in a new space, and you're confronted with the policy environment that you're jumping into being one that's born free, you're lucky. You say you're in the world of maybe 3D printing or virtual reality. You don't have an overarching federal, 3D printing commission or a VR law that you have to immediately contend with, or layers and layers of red tape that act as hurdles to you going out and doing interesting new things. You can just go do it. You can go, dream the dream, and you can put products to markets and try to make consumers happy. The problem is there's a whole bunch of other technologies or sectors that are unfortunately born into regulatory captivity, meaning they're immediately they're pigeonholed into some old analog era regulatory regime. Let me give you just a couple of quick examples. A driverless car is something new and different. In some ways, it's a computer on wheels. But unfortunately, it's not born free because at the end of the day, a driverless car is still a car. And we have a lot of automotive regulation in this country. Some of it makes sense, but a lot of it doesn't. And a lot of it is basically focused on constraining innovation and outputs and competition. And that's the world now that driverless car innovators are facing. And there's a lot of regulators, federal, state, and local level, trying to pigeonhole them into yesterday's broken regulatory environment. That tension between being born free and being born into captivity is a real problem in a world where technological convergence and convergent technological revolutions are happening. Because all of these technologies are coming together, and AI more than anything else drives them together. And so now public policy is being confronted with choices. Are we going to hold on to the past, or are we going to embrace the future? And so this is why we have to get public policy right, so that we don't essentially shut down new innovations in old spaces, or just new innovations period at all, while other international competitors, including China, race ahead.
Wow. Bingo. Once again, everything you said and everything I've read of yours, just it hits a visceral chord for me, which I hope folks really understand. Like, when Trump brings up deregulating, it isn't like semantics. It isn't bluster. It is like a felt issue for every common, like, day in, day out business leader, entrepreneur. Like, it is existentially a part of my my Thursday as we're recording. So yeah, I want to continue to, like, the stakes here are high. Let me segue another way of framing how high the stakes are. What I would call the Michael Jordan of venture capital. His name's Bill Gurley. This is the name that most people, like, didn't know. He was behind Uber. He was behind the big consumer technology wave of the last 15 years in the TV show Super Pumped. He's like kind of the second most important, like, character in the Uber development. And here's this guy. So once again, Michael Jordan of venture capital. He gave a talk at the All In Summit 2 years ago that I think went more viral than nearly any other talk that year amongst my larger tech community. And he unequivocally called out regulatory capture and gave historic examples of, man, the big telecom giants in decades past lobbied so aggressively to block you, me, and the common man from getting the most obvious technology innovation, like citywide Wi-Fi initiatives. Like, they put a damp cloth on innovation to protect their core business. So much so that he described for the first time a word that I hadn't thought of. So I've heard of, like, regulatory capture, but he described it as like there is a regulatory moat that can form when the big incumbents lobby in Washington to create so much onerous regulation that only they can pull it off. And it stops the startup from even getting to first base. And now here's what got spicy. One of the reasons it went so viral is he called out Sam Altman by name. So all of a sudden, me and my peers are like, "Oh no, he didn't!" Because that's exactly what's at play right now, and the stakes couldn't be higher. So, man, take that and run, Adam. Like, what did you think when you heard that?
Yeah, so let's elaborate on what Bill was talking about in terms of regulatory mode, and let's use the example of something he was involved in, which was his Uber. Because for fully 100 years, for the better part of the entirety of the last century, The world of taxi cabs and limos was completely controlled at the municipal level by cartels and monopolies. These were protected monopolies that state and local leaders were basically in bed with and said, like, you get a token or a medallion or a license to operate and nobody else can. It was illegal. It was total born in, regulatory captivity nonsense. And it was a giant anti-consumer fiasco. And for a full century, economists, political scientists, lawyers, and even the government itself studied this sector and said, yeah, that's right. It's a disaster. We need more competition. And yet nothing changed. Nothing changed. The moat was so big, the power was so strong at the local level with these taxis and these limo companies, nobody could break into the market. What changed? Well, what changed was 2010 and Uber and then Lyft came around. And they acted as evasive entrepreneurs that came in and basically said, the hell with this system. We're going to go around it. We're going to try to find a way to offer the public service, see if they like it. And if they do, we think that'll be our way of effectuating positive change for freedom and technology. And it worked. Once people got a taste of the waters of freedom and choice, they were like, yeah, we're not going back to that. And it forced the disruption of that sector and allowed venture capitalists like Bill Gurley and others to come in and support the next thing and the next thing. And, at the end of the day, it wasn't the end of all regulation. We still have rules for Uber, probably a few too many, in fact. And we have a lot of rules for the sharing economy more broadly, things, like Airbnb and others. But the bottom line is disruptive change was the thing that forced the paradigmatic shift in the way we treated that sector and that policy worked. And so Bill's exactly right. We don't want to have that happen to new sectors. We don't want to have new AI companies building immediately, regulatory moats around frontier models or around various other systems such that, say, small and mid-sized operators or open source providers can't come in and also offer a new flavor of competition or choice. And this is, again, the essential moment. Like every industry or technology has what you might think of as a constitutional moment where we're going to figure out is freedom allowed here or not? And with the internet, we mostly got it right. We basically said, thanks to the Clinton-Gore administration, we're going to bless this model, this new vision, for the internet with freedom, and we're going to have a firewall between the new digital world and the old analog world. We're not going to treat the internet like broadcast radio, or CBs, if you can remember those, or anything. We're going to treat it differently. We're going to give it a chance. We're going to see if freedom works. And so sometimes policymakers get it right. Other times, people like Bill Gurley and Uber have to come along and say, you know what, we have to do this ourselves. We have to show the public that choice is a good thing, competition can work, we're going to give it a shot. And the question is, how does that play out now in the AI age for all the different sectors that could be affected by this sort of change?
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I think there is maybe a bellwether or a proof point of either the U.S. can do what we've done well over the last 30 years, exactly like you're describing, or what's the counterfactual? It's Europe.
Yep.
Oh, and let me set up with here's some of these data points and some quotes that I think you're gonna just be able to take and run. That in my world, I've heard it described as the Brussels effect, right? It's I'm assuming that's got to be the HQ for the EU, and whether it's GDPR that went into effect in 2018, or there's I got a list. There's too long of a list. Yeah. But even the 2024 EU's Artificial Intelligence Act, the thing that's blown my mind is when I listen to some of these top commissioners, they are braggadocious about we don't export tech, we export tech regulation. Right. I'm like, whoa, I can't think of a more dim-witted, short-sighted statement. Yeah. Here's two that I have saved. When they launched, this is the European Commission, when they launched GDPR. GDPR has become a global benchmark for privacy, showing how Europe leads in protecting citizens' rights. I'm like, okay, well, in theory, I like that a little bit, you're protecting citizens. But in reality, let me read one more. It's when the 2024 Artificial Intelligence Act, it's just bragging that, yeah, Europe is the global leader in trustworthy AI and that we're balancing safety that others will follow. It's okay, once again, I can understand. If I were to steel man their argument, it's hey, there's probably pure intentioned folks involved, but what's the net effect?
Right.
Name me a single top 10 tech company in the EU.
Right.
You can't come up with one. And then name for either me and my American company the cost for me to do business in Europe is dramatically higher, and therefore I'm not hiring in Europe. I'm not bringing my product to market there. I'm taking on multiple other markets. And then how is it experienced by the entrepreneur in Europe? I've seen numbers that should have the European Commission absolutely run in backtracking, that the operational costs are higher, IP costs are higher, hiring costs are higher, everything across the board. You're just burdening with additional costs.
Yep.
So Adam, same thing. Take it and run.
Yeah, so let's step back and for political scientists, economists, and historians, we care about where we can find natural real world experiments where you take two common situated countries or continents and you compare them over time and say like what policies worked. And you don't know, it's not always easy to do, but sometimes you have a good case study, and this is the perfect one. In fact, I regard it as the paradigmatic case study. Wow. I started doing tech policy in Washington, D.C. 34 years ago, and at that point in time, people forget, the U.S. and the European Union were on relatively even footing as it pertained to digital technologies in this new world of the internet. They had tons of entrepreneurs and great firms, brilliant minds. Tim Berners-Lee and company were over there inventing the World Wide Web, and they were doing great things, and we were kind of a little bit concerned, like who was going to win the digital race. Well, flash forward to today, and it's all over. Let's just go through some numbers, because you already identified some of them, talking about how hard it is to identify, European digital tech innovators. Well, here are the numbers. 18 of the 25 largest digital technology companies in the world today are U.S. headquartered companies. Only 2 are European, and most people can't name them. 75% of global unicorns by value are U.S. companies. 3% are European companies. There are only 8 companies in the world that are trillion-dollar companies. 7 of them are headquartered in the U.S. Only none are in the European Union. And the Bureau of Economic Analysis, a government agency, did a survey a couple years back of like exactly what has the digital economy done for us lately. Well, here's what it's done for us. How about $4 trillion of gross output, accounting for 10% of GDP and 9 million jobs. These are incredible numbers. But as you pointed out, Quinn, you look at the other side of the Atlantic and you're like, they're the biggest loser. They've got nothing left to export except rules and regulations and red tape. That is how you essentially engage in continental technological suicide. You make policy choices that say, we're going to constrain our best and brightest and make it harder for them to do bold things. And what happens? Well, we live in a world of global innovation arbitrage. The inventors and the investors leave. And thank God we were here with open arms in America saying, yeah, come on over. We're ready to go. You've got opportunity here. And the rest is history. Now, let's be clear about why this is so important. This isn't just about simple economics or like, do we have more fun gadgets and, technological platforms? This is about geopolitical strategic strength and security.
Yeah.
Europe has suffered because of this. And the real irony is they've said a lot of this regulation is necessary because we have to counter the evil big tech American companies. Well, guess who are the only people left standing in Europe who can afford all the compliance costs? It's American big tech companies. The irony of this is too rich to believe. I couldn't have written this script, and people wouldn't have believed it in 94 that it would play out this way. But why? Well, you identified some of it, GDPR, but that's not the end of it. They have a whole bunch of other things, the DSA, the DMA, and now that EU AI Act, and so many others, that essentially take a precautionary principle approach to things, saying we have to be careful. There are risks, there are dangers, and therefore we have to preemptively try to make everything perfect before we allow any freedom or any innovation to move forward. The problem with that mentality is that if you spend your entire life and your entire public policy work focused on worst case scenarios, then best case scenarios can never happen. It's only through risk taking and trying new and different things that you get progress and prosperity. And the Europeans have sacrificed an entire quarter century now and are now wondering, like, are we going to have anybody that can help us out on AI? Or are we just going to lean on like American or Chinese companies? And that's unfortunately exactly where they're at right now.
Wow. Well, and then when I do or I'll say it this way, when my friends who don't work in tech, wherever they get their news, it's easy to pile on, like disparaging American tech and particularly big tech. once again, I can enter in, I can empathize with. Yeah, social media hasn't all been pure on the societal impact, but from an economic lens, if we focus the convo there, the sheer quantity of GDP created. Anyone that's got a Roth IRA or has any investment in the S&P 500, like, we are all participants in the massive value that's been created by the American technology sector in the last 25 years. And now here's the one that sometimes I just think most folks don't even begin to understand. Having big tech, the Facebook, Apple, Google, all the names that you can think of, having them in the U.S. could not be more critical to national security, protecting our national interests. And then the GDP that's created when, let me rattle this off, everyone guess what percentage of big tech's revenue is international, right? Most folks would be like, 5%, 10%. Apple, 56% of their revenue comes from outside the U.S. That money comes back to the U.S., benefits shareholders, taxpayers, retirees.
Yeah.
Microsoft, 50%. Meta, 61%. Alphabet, 53%. Every single one of those is 50% or more.
Yeah.
So these are actually, talk about exporting. Europe, you keep exporting regulation, meaning we're not going to buy it. And instead, let's, as the U.S. constituents, keep big tech accountable for some of the most, like, those fringe, really nasty social ills. But otherwise, we got to fan the flames.
Absolutely, and again, we can put numbers on this, Quinn. I mean, let's talk about what it's meant for the current economy just this year.
Yeah.
So already in 2025, the 7 largest U.S. tech AI firms have collectively spent $102.5 billion on data centers and AI infrastructure. And they're on their way to spending something around $400 billion for the year. These are, again, staggering numbers. And last year, that's more than we spent all of last year, by the way. Last year, we spent $100 billion from our largest firms, and that was already 12 times what China was spending. Again, Quinn, I'm just talking about private sector investment here. I'm talking about our private sector kicking China's ass. So we better damn well be happy that these companies are here doing it for us and not stuck in Europe or somewhere else, or in China. But it's even better than that, because this allows politicians, including Mr. Trump, to play some other games with, like, trade wars and stuff, because at the end of the day, this is what is essentially a massive private sector stimulus program. And there have been economic estimates that our GDP would currently be 2.1% lower without this private sector AI data center stimulus. So the compounding benefits to our economy just along the broad macroeconomic strokes are massive. And we haven't even gotten into the micro benefits for each and individual consumer and citizen in terms of, like, health benefits, public safety, all the new choices and everything else, new communications opportunities, new knowledge opportunities. You know, there's so much more there than just the economics. But boy, the economics matter. And you pointed out why. It all goes back to a broad-based prosperity and security. You know, you think about the European example, one final thing, and then I'll stop picking on them. But just think about, we are not even talking about the energy sector, right? I mean, it's not just that the Europeans shot themselves in the foot on modern digital technology. They were already busy shooting themselves in the foot on just the energy needs for their continent and completely over-reliant upon Russia and other nations. And now look where that's got them. Now they're in a huge bind. They don't have anything to fall back on in either the energy sector or the digital technology sector in terms of, like, competitive corporate strength. And they're stuck hoping, like, America will keep, like, coming to their salvation, or they're going to be stuck making really bad deals with the Chinese, which would be horrendously bad, you know, because then we could see Europe almost shifting out of our orbit into that orbit, and that would be a worst case scenario for geopolitical security.
I've never heard a single person make that point. That is viable. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, and I like this spectrum that I think we're kind of illustrating, being, all right, we've got how the U.S. has performed in the last 20 plus years. We've got how Europe has done in the last 20 years. I don't think you could give a worse. If there's something worse than an F on a test, that would be it. We're giving them a G. And then I think at the same time that the U.S. is examining, okay, well, what do we want to pick and choose maybe from the European regulatory bureaucracy? So there's probably merit to it. I would just say, hey, before we even examine the upside of regulation, let's first get really clear-eyed that, okay, we don't have any competitive tension with Europe. We do with China.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, there's both this carrot and stick reality that if we don't execute on what I would call like a national project, being energy revolution and AI revolution.
That's right.
Like a whole of nation, which is the term China uses. China does have that plan. They're executing on it. Whether we won't get into the energy side, even though it's super important to understand. The U.S. is going from 1 to 2 terawatts in energy. China's going from 3 to 8.
Right.
And now there's realities within just the AI arms race that whoever wins, it's predicated ultimately on a couple core variables. Energy is the obvious one. Yes, semiconductor development, we're going to get there. But then the rest it's ultimately training and training on corpuses of data.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that the U.S. regulates, I promise you, China has no misgivings taking that advantage and saying, great, you guys be super slow and careful
Yep.
with not accessing the full corpus of training data, basically being, just call it like the internet and all the books out there.
Right.
And instead, China, there's already ample proof. Just in the last year, some of the headlines that I've been rattled by, there are credible claims that DeepSeek, the one that kind of went viral for folks, that DeepSeek illegally trained on, it's called distilling, from OpenAI's technology. There's another one. This was maybe a little over a year ago. I have friends that work at Google. A senior software engineer stole like 500 plus critical AI files on behalf of the CCP, the Chinese government.
Right.
So all of a sudden it's like they know there's an arms race.
Yeah.
And they're looking for every strategic advantage imaginable. And then the last one is then what I hear folks assume is like, oh, but our engineers are better, right? Like, don't we have a lead there? I would encourage some analysis and some humility that I've worked with China. Like, there are 3 times more engineers in China and 8 times more engineers graduating college every year in STEM.
Yep.
So now is not the time for hubris.
Right.
In the U.S.
Absolutely.
So now, yeah, same thing. Like, how do you see it?
Well, the story the story you painted here it seems grim, but it's even worse. It's even worse.
Just layer it even further.
Because the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, has declared that it wants to be the world's AI leader by 2030, and they are taking steps to get there. They understand that AI is part of a set of concurrent technological revolutions involving robotics, quantum, data science, chips, crypto, biotech, all these things. They want to integrate them, create national champions, and then they want to export their products and their values in their embedded technological systems. And so they have an entire program set up called the Digital Silk Road program, part of their Belt and Road initiative. It basically is an effort to export their products and give them a leg up over American products in the full AI stack everywhere across the globe. And again, if they win that, if they diffuse first and faster with cheaper, low-cost solutions that other governments will obviously gobble up, then their values, their human rights or lack thereof, are the baseline, not American baseline. And so as much as people hate big tech, you should be a whole lot happier that there are products from our leading companies that are diffusing across the world versus Chinese products. So that's got to be front and center on every policymaker's mind. I think the good news is this. The Trump administration totally understands this. And they have said in their new AI action plan that, look, we've got a vision too, and it's rooted in freedom. And it's rooted in the idea that we're going to, here's an exact quote. I've got it here in front of me. The AI action plan says that we need, quote, a coordinated federal effort, which would be beneficial in establishing a dynamic try-first culture for AI across American industry. A try-first culture, meaning you go out and innovate, permissionless innovation. Like you engage in this innovation, and then we're going to support you as you move to the global stage to try to diffuse your products, and we're going to try to make sure that happens. They've actually put together executive orders on this, talked about using export assistance and so on and so forth. We could debate the merits of like any one of these things. The important thing is there's an important attitude change that's happened here with this administration from previous ones, which had a very dour view of AI, almost fear-based and like, wringing their hands. What are we going to do about this concern or that concern? And like you said, a lot of that was based on just, fear or hubris. Like they thought that like they could meticulously plan everything right out of the gates like the Europeans. And they can't. And Quinn, here's the crazy thing about this to me. We already have plenty of law in America to address the concerns or fears or risks associated with any algorithmic problems. AI is not going to be exempt from civil rights laws or consumer protection standards or unfair and deceptive practices or recall authority at various agencies. All that law is fine. I'm down with all that. We should basically take that and provide more technical training to our existing regulators to make sure that they can get their policies right where we already have basic law for various technological systems. Maybe we're a little excessive in some cases, like we've done some bad things with drones in this country. We've really hurt that sector, and China's advanced because we got our policies wrong there. We overregulated. But in other ways, our government has done some sensible things and just said, well, we're going to take the punches as they come at us, and we'll enforce after the fact if harms develop and have been proven in a court of law, and we've got existing regulations and fines and a whole bunch of trial lawyers ready to pounce if anything goes wrong. That's a pretty good regulatory regime. I'm not against that. We're not talking about anarchy here. This is what's crazy to me is that lawmakers act like we live in a Wild West. No, we don't. We don't live in anything like a Wild West. We have plenty of law. We have 441 federal agencies at the federal level in our government. Every one of them is interested in AI, probably a little too interested in some cases. But the bottom line is we should utilize existing regulatory capacity before inventing whole cloth, a whole new broad-based regulatory regime a la Europe with technocratic top-down planning. That's what we don't want, or else China wins. That would be shooting ourselves in the foot as the great AI race gets underway.
It's brilliant. Hopefully our listeners just understand how clear the case is. That like when examined from this like a foreign policy lens, it feels clear as day to me at least. But now I'm going to wade into maybe what I would call even, dare I say, even more complicated waters. And I'll frame it around friends of mine who are like fairly high up in the Silicon Valley AI industry actually don't have a uniform belief on the AI diffusion rule to China. Yeah. Where everything that you said for the first 30 minutes, I can just picture the folks that are listening, they're just nodding their heads. Sure. They're like, yep, and amen. Like, woo! Right. And they're raising their hand. Yeah, they're on board. And now this is the first one where I'm like, even myself, I typically am pretty decisive. Depending on who I listen to, they typically convince me. So maybe I'll just let you. I won't frame beyond. Biden tried to put clear export rules on semiconductors, the chips that build AI, and all the best ones came from the U.S., and then layered on additional export restrictions around model weights and trainings, just like all the building blocks of AI was going into effect in March. And now Trump is hopefully righting the ship. But now, Adam, like maybe explain it in more detail, and I genuinely give me your take because you're probably going to convince me.
Well, actually, I'm probably not, because here's the funny thing, Quinn, is in all my years of doing this, again, three decades in the field of tech policy, there's been two areas that I've always struggled mightily with. One has been copyright, intellectual property, and its applicability to new digital systems. Legitimately hard questions there. Yeah. The other is export controls. It's really, really hard because obviously these are restrictions on trade and development and, commerce. And I'm usually against that. On the other hand, I don't want our adversaries getting our best systems. And we've always had export controls for advanced technological systems, as we should, when the adversaries are threatening our national interests. Yeah. The problem is where you draw lines with new types of modern technologies. And this is legitimately difficult. And the Biden administration went way too far, probably, with sweeping rules that basically covered even allies of ours and said, you're going to be put on a list of like countries we can't trade with because it might later get over to China or Iran or something. It's like, boy, you can't have a regime like that, or else you're just playing whack-a-mole trying to stop trade all over the world. Anytime somebody trades an H20 chip or something, it just doesn't work. At the same time, when the Trump administration came in and repealed all that and tried to put something new on the books, they've really struggled. They've struggled because it's hard. Like, which allies do we trust enough to trade fully with and give the best stuff we've got? And which ones do we fear like they might just end up selling it underground to the Chinese the next day? That's hard. And then there's the question of these bilateral deals. Do we cut one-off deals with someone in the Middle East, the Saudi Arabians or whatever? Or do we even cut deals with China as part of a conditional trade where we're using chips literally as a bargaining chip to get maybe critical minerals? The whole process kind of stinks. It's not cool. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes you just have to admit it's a suboptimal scenario. And I think this administration believes in its heart that it's important that America's tech stack be diffused across the world, even in China. And the logic there makes a little sense. If the Chinese are relying on our systems to some degree, they're maybe not developing their own to the fullest capacity. Now, that gambit could go the other direction.
I know.
It's a to-be-determined question right there. And you believe me, I have good friends of mine. We sat around bars in Washington, D.C. arguing about this and screaming at each other. So this is not easy. This is, in fact, I think the single hardest question in the field of AI governance is the question of export controls and diffusion rule stuff. So you got me on that one. I can't convince you because I'm of two minds on that one myself.
Oh, well, no, it genuinely makes me respect you more. I'm like, at the end of the day, oftentimes the most important political decisions are the ones that involve some gray area.
Yeah.
And someone that comes in kicking and screaming that they are, they have a monopoly on the truth.
Right.
I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't elicit confidence for me. I think, let me, this is like off script. I didn't really plan for this, but here's my most recent musing, which is I've found, this is so niche, but let me explain it just a little bit for context. China has, dare I say, a chokehold on the rare earth minerals. What is that? Most people, when they hear that, they're like, sounds rare, sounds maybe important. And it's like, no, these are the foundational building blocks, the components that build all of the technology that you and I need day in, day out. So all of a sudden, if they turn off the spigot 6 months, a year from now, cars are going to stop coming off the line. Phones are going to stop getting unboxed at the Apple store. So there's an interesting experience that I've had witnessing all of that drama in Trump's trade war, that like, oh my gosh, them having that chokehold provides them immeasurable leverage, which is the currency of a negotiation. And in the same way, Biden's policy and the impressive rate of development from Huawei, it's the only one that I've tried to follow a little bit, yes, made it feel like, well, no matter what, we can stop exporting and they're going to be pure competitors in a year or two.
Yep.
Maybe it's more. So for the sake of the argument, it's like, well, then did we achieve our end? Now we've given them pure competition and we've ceded our leverage.
Yep.
Because especially with Trump in power, God willing, there's going to be no hot wars, but there will be a variety of, I'll just call them deals, negotiations, and you want leverage. You want chips on your side of the table,
right?
Metaphorical chips and semiconductor chips.
That's right.
It seems that part feels more clarifying to me, coupled with all of the other boosts when NVIDIA, with a founder I actually trust. I have spent, tens of hours listening to Jensen Huang. I want that guy to win. I want him to be in our corner because he cares about American interests and he has just like a very sound mind on his shoulders. Sure. And then NVIDIA, all of us getting the externalities, the benefits of the best technology, the GDP, the taxes, our retirement, getting the boost from NVIDIA taking off. Like, for that reason, I'm currently, thank you for not convincing me, but in this moment, I'm 51% in favor of exporting maybe the like B class line, maybe not the most top tier NVIDIA chips. So there's, I won't get into it, but there's basically 4 lines. It's like, okay, is it A100s, the H100s, the A20s, and now
H20s,
the B model. Exactly.
yeah.
So it's like, maybe we give them just one rung below
Yeah.
they're the best in class.
Right.
So how do you like? Just
Well,
coach them?
that's
I really
exactly
am-
what the Trump administration has basically done, and they basically said, like, look, we're not giving them the A plus chips. You know, we're giving them something that's very degraded by design, and it was basically NVIDIA was complying with the law. You know, they basically said we will create a degraded chip for the Chinese market, and you know, then we'd like to export it, and the government said yes, and they kind of changed their mind, and then the government changed their mind back. And so it's not Jensen's fault. You know, he's just trying to follow the law and continue to be a world leading exporter. By the way, I just want to stop really quick and say about Jensen and NVIDIA, every time I have a talk about American AI tech companies and the state of play, and NVIDIA comes up, or OpenAI or Anthropic or any other of the great new players, I always just stop and remind everybody, like, these aren't even companies that were on most people's lips 5 years ago.
5 years.
I mean, it is incredible the amount of churn and like creativity and new faces that come along that all of a sudden are just like taken for granted. But it's like, oh yeah. So anyway, about NVIDIA, what should we do? I'm like, wait a minute, how blessed are we?
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle. It's incredible, and the story about how it came about is like the American dream incarnate.
It is a miracle,
right? And so we need to remember, like, we got policy right. We got the policy prerequisites of growth and opportunity right. And so we want to make sure we continue on that track. So we don't want to do anything crazy and overzealous like the Biden administration and others have proposed, and which unfortunately some of our state governments are proposing now, which is something we should talk about. But the reality is that I think the hard questions remain unanswered about export controls, and only time will tell. And that's a very frustrating, incomplete answer. I think there are people that care very passionately about American interests on both sides of this who make very compelling arguments that I can see the points of. But I don't know. You know, we might be giving the Chinese some support to create the next DeepSeek, but they already created DeepSeek. You know, I mean, and you mentioned, you know, Huawei. I mean, Huawei and DeepSeek and Tencent and like all of these players, they're there. Yeah. They're coming.
They're operating. They're in sixth gear.
Yeah. And let's keep them. Also, a lot of them are open source, low cost, nimble, easy to use solutions. You can download these things right now on your phone in an American App Store. And that's a new world. This is not like the Cold War competition we had with like the Soviet Union. We didn't really care to import any of their stuff. Maybe their vodka. But, you know, like at the end of the day, this is a far more formidable and interesting competitor because it's not a purely communist juggernaut. They actually are in global markets trying to sell, right? That's really hard for us to figure out how to create a policy paradigm to deal with. In a better world, we'd be trading actively with the Chinese and like they'd be a fair, you know, player. But they're not a fair player, and they threaten our interests in some ways and the interests of others. So technology becomes part of that game, and you said it best. It becomes like a bargaining chip, and it becomes a part of geopolitical strategic advantage. But at the end of the day, we still got to deal with the Chinese. And in a best of all worlds, we're diffusing tensions.
Yeah, correct.
And technology can help do that. If we're trading chips and they're trading as critical minerals, there's an interest in making sure that reciprocal flow continues without bombs flying.
Yeah,
right? And I know that at the end of the day, some of the skeptics will say, but we don't want to give the Chinese a leg up, or we're helping them like race alongside us. Man, I don't know. I think they're doing that anyway. Right? So again, I'm sorry to be Jekyll and Hyde on this. I'll just go back and forth all day long on it.
Oh, well, no. It once again it builds that next incremental respect. Like, oh, Adam's a deep thinker, and he's not wedded to whatever the partisan line is of the day.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Like, no, there's merit to both sides of the argument, and therefore we need a wise hand on the tiller guiding us as we navigate choppy waters. Yeah. But I want to double click just for a moment on like what makes, I'm totally making this up and it's going to be overly poetic. Like, is it a miracle if it happens again and again and again? And I think it still is. Yeah. And Jensen is one of those.
Absolutely.
Jensen, let's just pick the persona that in America we take for granted, but it doesn't mean it's not a miracle.
Yeah.
Which is born in Taiwan. Dad's an engineer, mom's a school teacher, instill amazing values. My basic understanding is that he was moving around Southeast Asia as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like he lived in Taiwan or Thailand for a little bit. He came to the U.S. I think more or less in middle school. So it's like it's this isn't your token, like, I don't know, white Protestant neighbor down the street. It's like this guy had a fascinating upbringing. And then it's hard to summarize the NVIDIA story. I love this podcast called Acquired. So I'm just going to point to the 3-hour podcast that I listened to a year and a half ago. And if there's one subtext over 3 hours that you will get, Jensen, with like the sheer power of human will, a great team, and a big vision, defied the most exponential odds for 32 years straight. In a way that, like, you listen to the Microsoft or the Dell story or like any of that 1980, early 1990 vintage, it was actually a tiny bit more of a straight line.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, Bill Gates came up with the personal computer in high school and has been a billionaire since the age of whatever. Like Zuck, same thing, been a billionaire since he was 25. Jensen earned his stripes. And we are privileged that despite being born in a different country with a culture that's much more Taiwan and China, like, that makes me assume his mother tongue is Mandarin, and yet he is so committed to American ideas.
Yeah, he's here. He's here winning for us.
That's the miracle.
It is a miracle.
That's the miracle.
It's also the story of why immigrants have powered so much of the technological revolutions of modern times, and why we can't give up on, that. I mean, this is a controversial issue these days. It's one that I'm somewhat at tension with some Republicans and Trump administration officials. I know it's a heated debate, but the reality is that Silicon Valley was built on the backs of like really talented, high-skilled immigrants and all of the investment that came along with them. When they all flocked here from Taiwan, from China, from Europe, from everywhere else, they brought their ideas and then the money followed. And, when people ask me, like, what's the secret sauce that powered the digital revolution? It's minds, money, and markets. And it really begins with the minds. And the more minds you can get with brilliant ideas, the philosopher Matt Ridley, British philosopher, he has a wonderful book called Why Innovation Matters. And he has this phrase in it called, when ideas have sex. And he says when ideas come together and have intercourse, they birth new and more brilliant ideas. This is the story of the Valley. This is the story of why America wins. We bring together the best and brightest minds, and some of them have sex, but then their ideas have sex, and it just propagates and continues and continues. But I want to go back to something you said, Quinn, that's really important about continuing to nurture this environment. A lot of my favorite economists, political scientists, F.A. Hayek, Joel McCurr, and others who are economic historians, they talk about innovation as an ecosystem or almost like a garden that needs to be constantly tended so that crops and plants continuously grow, and we make sure we have the proper environment for that healthy ecosystem to develop. And there can be times when nations are going along fine and dandy and have a beautiful, industrial ecosystem or technological ecosystem, and then things go disastrously wrong. That's Europe. I mean, Europe was there before us, right? As was with Britain, and then things go horribly wrong. And so that's a cautionary tale that America has to make sure we continually rejuvenate or regrow that garden with the proper policies, that we make sure we nurture the next Jensen Huang and the next NVIDIA and everybody else. That's the essential part of this story. And it goes back to your point about not having hubris or being arrogant about things like we can plan everything in the future. Nobody has a technological crystal ball. There's no technological Nostradamus out there. We don't know where markets are going to turn next. That's okay. We can embrace that uncertainty.
The beauty.
Yeah. So I hope that's going to continue. I think right now the Trump administration's got us on the right track. There's still some disarray in our states. There's 1,000 AI bills pending in the United States, 1,000. And, they're not all regulatory, but 1,000 is a lot. In my decades of covering tech, I've never known another technology or issue where 1,000 bills were floated in 5 months of a year. And a lot of them are from just a couple of states. California, Illinois, New York, and Colorado have 250 of those, and a lot of them are pretty heavy-handed. And sadly, some of those blue states are importing European-like ideas and regulatory models like, wow, the GDPR is fine and dandy. Let's apply it here in Colorado. No, we don't want that. So that patchwork of policies now threatens to be like weeds in that ecosystem that just strangles innovators with all sorts of red tapes and compliance costs, making small and medium-sized enterprises really struggle to get off the ground, and just kills open source. Just kills it. There's no way open source providers can comply with that nonsense. So we have to get that right. We need a national framework. We had a national framework for the internet. The Clinton-Gore administration worked with the Republican Congress in a bipartisan way. So let's have a national vision for electronic commerce and the internet. They even preempted conflicting and discriminatory state and local taxes that would have hit internet access. That was preempted. They put a moratorium on that. Incredible, right? So that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about right now, like tending the garden for tomorrow. How do we get the next set of companies? Well, it begins with not putting a bunch of regulatory hurdles in their way, a la top-down technocratic European-style mandates from 50 different states and all the different jurisdictions. Because it's not just the states. A whole bunch of municipalities are now trying to play this game. Like, well, we want our piece of the AI pie. We want to, micromanage. The most important AI hiring law in the United States is New York City's bill. New York City. And they're going to basically say, everybody does business in New York, and so we can all regulate your algorithms if you use them to hire people. What? That's crazy. We can't run a market that way, especially if it's New York City's new mayor being the person running that market. That would be truly insane. So we're in a we're in a good moment generally, but there are some real tensions there.
Yeah. Update me on the we'll call this the little news flash, because I genuinely think you're going to be more up to speed than me. In my tech community, I remember over the last 2 or 3 months, the kind of the formation and the due process to get the big beautiful bill passed. I remember numerous times in VC calls, folks bringing up a 10-year moratorium on state-level AI. And then I've been really busy at work, so I haven't fully followed up. But then I think I saw a headline explaining that the Senate overrode that. It got punted from the BBB. So where are we right now? And am I even understanding the kind of current events properly?
You are correct. Basically, as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, there was a provision that would have placed this 10-year moratorium on new AI-specific state and local regulatory enactments. It did keep the states free to engage in what was called generally applicable law. So if you have consumer protection laws or civil rights laws or child safety laws, whatever, those were still equally applicable. But you could not single out algorithmic or computational systems for special discriminatory regulations that would essentially counter the sort of national framework that we've been trying to develop to fight China. And 10 years was a long time, and that made a lot of people uncomfortable. But the reality is what Congress was considering there was an attempt to try to say, look, we need to have a learning period where we figure out what works, and also we get our national house in order and get Congress to pass something. And that can take some time, but having some patience and humility here makes some sense while we live in this world of uncertainty and we're fighting this fight with China. And so it was an attempt to call a little bit of a timeout on excessive, overzealous regulatory activity, especially from those 4 states I mentioned, which aren't exactly, the most pro-freedom states in the nation, because they're racing ahead with laws. And Colorado already passed one. Comprehensive AI law passed last year, and they're now currently trying to figure out if they should delay it because they're worried about its costs. California got close to a big bill. New York passed one. It's sitting on the governor's desk. So there's activity out there, and we could make mistakes. I'm really, really concerned about this. I spent a huge amount of my time personally this year just going state house to state house, testifying and saying, don't go there. Wow. Be patient, be careful. There are other ways you can approach this besides the European-style technocratic regulation. But at the end of the day, Congress needs to act. Congress needs to say, we've got a role here. It can't just be the Trump administration trying to do it all on its own. And so that's where we're at as of August 2025. We're waiting to see, will Congress finally get its butt in gear and have something to say to help make sure that AI opportunity is a reality in the United States.
Wow. Oh, I'm want to applaud you. I'm so grateful for your work.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for traveling to those states.
Some of them aren't fun places to travel to, by the way.
No, I can only imagine. Yeah. Okay, I think, man, this time is going. It's flying. So maybe let's perhaps start coming towards a close around exactly what you would say to 2 personas, either a VC of mine who's a moderate Democrat, who's a big fan of innovation, or the Ro Khanna congressman that they support financially, who's also in that moderate Democrat, who's quite literally from the Silicon Valley district. Coach them on just what is in America's best interest right now, exactly on this topic of how the heck do we think about AI regulation do we punt the football down 5 years and then talk about it then? Is there something we do now? I'm could not be more curious for you.
Yeah, well, I think we begin by maturely admitting to them that there are huge uncertainties surrounding AI for society, for the economy, and for public policy. But that doesn't mean we should freeze everything in place or embrace old regulatory status quo. We must embrace opportunity. We have to look at what's in front of us and the serious challenges that we face internationally. This is a technological revolution we cannot afford to lose. And I know a lot of people don't like this whole technological race metaphor, like we're racing with China. The reality is we're racing with China. We're in the middle of what some people call an AI cult.
They're racing us.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
If we don't admit it, we're really
And we've already gone through the ramifications if we get it wrong and we lose that. So what is America's biggest advantage when we fight against China? It's not embracing the Chinese model of control. It's embracing freedom. It's embracing an innovation culture of opportunity and entrepreneurialism and investment, and ensuring that we clear a path for America's best and brightest to go out there and do bold things. Yes, there's going to be policy things we need to answer. I don't deny that there are concerns about jobs, about things like education, about misinformation. Look, we're going to have some policy fights. That's the reality. We always did. We did it for the internet age. But we can do these things on a parallel track. We can advance the technology as we did with the internet, but say, okay, we're also going to have a sidetrack conversation going about maybe how we need to tweak copyright law, or what we need to do about privacy standards, or what we need to do about job retraining and reskilling. These are very legitimate debates to have, but we can't stop the clock. We can't freeze everything in place until we think we've got it just right. There's no Goldilocks formula of getting everything just perfect, The reality is it's messy and ongoing. We have to have an agile, iterative, adaptive policy. And that's what's ultimately always made America great, is that we're flexible. We embrace risk-taking and experimentation. I'm so happy that the Democratic Party is finally coming around to embracing an abundance agenda. What it means in practice remains to be seen. And there's a war for the soul of the Democratic Party going on right now about these conflicting visions of progress. I'm really hoping the abundance side wins that debate. And a lot of people in the Valley are on that. They're in that fight. They're in it. They have issues with Trump, and many of them supported Biden. But the reality is that something needs to change in the Democratic world. And Ro Khanna, I think he can be part of it. I hope he is. But it's going to require a embrace of the future and an embrace of progress and true abundance.
I couldn't agree more. Man, Adam, I'm moved again and again. As we come to a close, I really am grateful. I sometimes get this sense when friends that are like public servants of the various kind, folks in politics, but I'm like, oh man, I really appreciate my friend when I understand, like, you're a doctor, you just worked a 12-hour shift. Thank you. I appreciate it. I was just sitting on Zoom all day trying to close sales. Really appreciate what you do, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And Adam, I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Genuinely.
Thank you very much.
It's good work. And I think it's stunningly bipartisan, even though it's so unequivocally rooted in America's interests.
Absolutely.
And our national security and the world that we want our kids to inherit.
Absolutely.
And even though, I personally enjoy reading Cato Institute, but amongst some friends, they're like, oh, whoa. And I'm like, no. There's really good work. And now that they're hearing someone that comes from that ilk, it's like, wait, Adam was incredibly, obviously eloquent, but just compelling top to bottom. And I think it's going to, open or soften minds in a really good way.
Well,
so thank you.
Well, I hope so. And people can find out more information about me on the R Street Institute website or on Twitter. And was happy to join the show, and I'm really excited about the future. And I think I want to just double click on the point you made about this is a bipartisan thing. Yeah. The reason I love tech and innovation policy is that we have come together in the past and done what's right for America. I mean, I spend more time praising the Clinton-Gore vision for the internet than I do anything any Republican has ever done. Wow. It was the best thing that ever happened to America in the last quarter century when we got policy right for the digital economy. It was a huge win for this country. So we've done it before, we can do it again.
Adam, I'm moved. I appreciate your time. Everyone, give him a follow across socials and R Street. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me.